Hey, Princess, that antique scope is gonna help you hit the barn door.
Drill Sergeant Brennan's voice boomed across Camp Pendleton's sniper range like a sledgehammer, making every Marine within 50 yards turn to stare at the small woman clutching an M40A6 rifle that looked like it belonged in a museum. The California sun blazed overhead at 1300 hours, casting harsh shadows across the concrete firing positions where 23 elite Marine recruits had gathered for their final sniper qualification. Bryn Caldwell stood barely 5 feet 4 inches in her faded gray t-shirt and combat boots, her blonde curls escaping from a messy high bun as desert wind whipped across the range. The rifle in her hands was a relic, scratched stock, worn bipod, and a scope that had seen better decades. Around her, the other recruits sported pristine equipment and cocky grins, their fresh uniforms and polished gear marking them as the cream of the crop. "Seriously, who let Supply mix up the training rifles?" Garrett Whitmore called out, his 6-foot frame towering over his expensive spotting scope. "That thing looks like it survived World War II. The group erupted in cruel laughter, phones already emerging to record what they assumed would be spectacular failure at the 1,000-yard line. But something in Bryn's steady blue eyes suggested they had no idea what they were about to witness. Something that would transform their mockery into stunned silence, their confidence into terror, and their assumptions about weakness into a lesson they'd never forget. In exactly 18 minutes, when that torn gray t-shirt revealed what was hidden beneath, every person on this range would understand they had made the biggest mistake of their military careers. The temperature gauge on the range building read 97 degrees Fahrenheit, but the heat shimmering off the concrete felt closer to 110. Sweat beaded on foreheads beneath Kevlar helmets as the elite recruits adjusted their positions along the firing line. These weren't ordinary Marines. They were the top 2%, handpicked from units across the Corps for advanced sniper training. Each had scored expert on the rifle range. Each carried recommendations from commanding officers, and each believed they represented the pinnacle of military marksmanship. Bryn moved with quiet precision toward the equipment table, her worn boots making no sound on the concrete. The other recruits gave her a wide berth, as if poverty might be contagious. Her rifle case was held together with duct tape, her shooting mat had seen better decades, and her gear bag looked like it had been assembled from a surplus store clearance sale. "Look at this," whispered Marine Fletcher to his squad mate, not bothering to lower his voice. "Did they seriously let someone's little sister onto the range?" The comment drew snickers from the group clustered around the premium equipment display. Drill Sergeant Brennan strutted along the firing line like a predator surveying his territory. At 6 feet 2 inches and 230 pounds of muscle, he commanded attention through pure physical presence. His dress blue instructor's uniform was crisp despite the heat, ribbons and medals creating a colorful display across his chest. Combat tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, marksmanship badges, and instructor certifications. His credentials were immediately visible to anyone who understood military decorations. "Listen up, Marines!" Brennan's voice carried the authority of someone who had earned respect through blood and bullets. "Today's qualification is not a participation trophy event. This is where we separate the operators from the wannabes. 1,000 yards, 10 rounds, wind conditions that would make a hurricane jealous. Half of you will wash out before lunch." He paused his pacing directly in front of Bryn, his shadow falling across her, as she methodically arranged her equipment with the same careful attention others reserved for handling explosives. "And some of you," he continued, his voice dripping with theatrical disdain, "shouldn't even be here to begin with." The other recruits turned to stare, sensing blood in the water. Garrett Whitmore adjusted his designer shooting glasses and grinned like a shark scenting chum. At 24, he was the unofficial leader of the elite group, a former college athlete who had dominated every training exercise since arriving at Camp Pendleton. His equipment alone cost more than most Marines made in 3 months. Custom rifle, precision optics, and accessories that represented the cutting edge of sniper technology. "Sergeant, with all due respect," Garrett called out, his voice carrying that particular brand of confidence that came from never having truly failed at anything. "Maybe she took a wrong turn looking for the mess hall." The laughter that followed was harsh and cutting, the kind that echoed across training grounds where weakness was currency and humiliation was sport. Phones appeared from pockets, held low, but ready to capture whatever entertainment was about to unfold. In the age of social media, failure could go viral in minutes, and these Marines were already composing captions for what they assumed would be a spectacular disaster. Bryn didn't react to the mockery. She simply continued her equipment check, running her fingers along the rifle's worn stock, with the familiarity of someone who had performed this ritual thousands of times. Her movements were economical, purposeful, betraying none of the nervous energy that radiated from the other recruits. Staff Sergeant Harwick observed from his position near the range office, his weathered face unreadable behind military-issue sunglasses. 20 years of service had taught him to read Marines the way others read books, and something about this quiet woman bothered him. Not her appearance. He'd seen plenty of Marines who didn't fit the recruiting poster image. It was her stillness, the way she moved through the chaos around her like water flowing around stones. If you've ever felt the burn of being underestimated or dismissed because of how you look, this story is going to be different. Smash that like button right now, because what happens next will remind you that real strength doesn't always announce itself. And hey, I'm curious, where are you watching this from? What country are you calling home today? Drop your location in the comments, because I love connecting with viewers from around the world. All right, let's establish some ground rules, Brennan announced, his voice cutting through the desert wind that had begun to pick up across the range. Shooting order will be determined by equipment quality and previous scores. The professionals shoot first. The amateurs clean up the mess afterward. He gestured toward Garrett and his crew, who pretended like peacocks at the recognition. Whitmore, Rodriguez, Chen, you're up in the first group. Show these rookies how it's done. His gaze then shifted to Bryn, and his smile turned predatory. And you, Princess, get to be our grand finale. Think of it as dinner theater, the main course followed by comedy. The insult hit like a physical blow, and several recruits actually stepped back as if expecting an explosion. But Bryn simply nodded once, her expression unchanging. Understood, Sergeant. The calmness of her response seemed to infuriate Brennan more than any angry retort would have. He'd spent his career breaking Marines down and building them back up, and this woman's unflappable demeanor represented a puzzle he couldn't immediately solve. Private Ashford, a 19-year-old from Ohio who still looked like he should be asking permission to use the bathroom, sidled closer to Bryn during the equipment distribution. "Hey," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the wind. "Don't let them get to you. Brennan's just showing off for the observers." Bryn glanced at him, and for a moment her professional mask slipped enough to reveal something almost like gratitude. "Thanks, but I can handle it." "I know you can," Ashford replied, surprising himself with his conviction. "There's something about you that's different. Good difference." Before Bryn could respond, Garrett Whitmore's voice boomed across the range. "Hey, Ashford, stop hitting on the help and get your gear sorted, unless you want to end up in the charity case group with her." The laughter that followed was uglier this time, tinged with genuine cruelty. These weren't just jokes anymore. They were establishing a hierarchy, and Bryn was being positioned firmly at the bottom. Range Officer Mills began setting up the electronic target system, his movements sharp and professional despite the heat. At 45, he'd seen enough Marines come through his range to fill a small city, and he'd developed an instinct for identifying potential problems before they exploded. The tension building around the small woman with the ancient rifle was setting off every alarm bell in his experienced mind. "Targets are established at 1,000 yards, Mills announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd spent 23 years in the Corps before transitioning to civilian instruction. Wind conditions are currently 15 to 20 miles per hour from the southwest, with gusts up to 30. The temperature is 97 degrees with 60% humidity. These are not ideal shooting conditions." He paused to let that information sink in before continuing. "For those of you keeping score at home, ideal shooting conditions don't exist in combat zones. If you can't adapt to environmental challenges, you won't survive your first deployment." Dr. Holbrook, the base's chief medical officer, had positioned herself near the observation area with a clear view of the entire range. Officially, she was present to monitor for heat exhaustion and provide medical support if needed. Unofficially, she'd developed a fascination with the psychological dynamics that played out during high-stress training events. The way these young Marines established dominance hierarchies reminded her of research she'd conducted on primate behavior during her graduate studies. The first shooter took his position with the confidence of someone who'd never missed a target that mattered. Marine Rodriguez was built like a linebacker, but moved with the precision of a surgeon as he settled into his shooting stance. His rifle was a work of art, custom barrel, precision trigger, and optics that cost more than some people's cars. "Watch and learn, ladies," Rodriguez called out, his accent thick with South Texas swagger. "This is how you punch holes in paper at a serious distance." His first shot cracked across the range like thunder, and every eye focused on the electronic display board. The screen lit up with numbers, a solid 8-ring hit, respectable but not spectacular. Rodriguez's confident grin faltered slightly as he adjusted his scope and prepared for his second shot. The wind had other plans. A sudden gust caught his bullet mid-flight, pushing it wide of the target entirely. The miss registered on the board with embarrassing clarity, and Rodriguez's face flushed red beneath his Kevlar helmet. "Environmental conditions," Mills observed dryly. "They're a real inconvenience when you're trying to look impressive." 2 more shots produced marginal results, another 8 and a 7-ring hit. Rodriguez was clearly struggling with the wind patterns. His shots scattered across the target face like someone had thrown darts blindfolded. By his 5th shot, his confidence had evaporated entirely, replaced by the frustrated tension of someone who'd never had to work this hard for results. Garrett Whitmore stepped up to the firing line with the swagger of someone who'd watched his competition struggle and believed he could do better. His equipment was even more impressive than Rodriguez's, a custom rifle that looked like it belonged in a museum, complete with a scope that probably cost more than most people made in a month. "Amateurs," he muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. "You have to read the wind, not fight it." His shooting stance was textbook perfect, the result of countless hours with private instructors and specialized training courses that most Marines could never afford. The first shot rang out with authority, and the target board displayed a respectable 9-ring hit. The second shot was even better, a solid 10 that drew appreciative nods from the observers. Garrett was clearly in his element, adjusting for wind and distance with the practiced ease of someone who'd made this look easy since high school JROTC. But the third shot went wide, caught by a wind shift that changed direction without warning. The fourth barely caught the edge of the target. By the 5th shot, Garrett's perfect form was deteriorating as frustration crept into his movements. "Wind's picking up," he announced, as if this absolved him of responsibility for his declining performance. "Conditions are getting impossible out there." Chen, the 3rd member of the elite group, fared no better. His shots were technically sound, but consistently thrown off by environmental factors that seemed to shift every few seconds. The desert wind was notorious for its unpredictability, and today it was living up to its reputation with malicious glee. Staff Sergeant Harwick watched the proceedings with growing interest. These were supposed to be the best Marines the Corps had to offer, hand-picked for advanced training based on their previous performance. Yet none of them was adapting to the challenging conditions with the flexibility that marked truly elite operators. His attention shifted to Bryn, who had been observing each shooter with the focused intensity of someone taking detailed mental notes. She wasn't just watching the shots. She was studying the wind patterns, the way the heat shimmer affected visibility, the subtle environmental cues that experienced shooters learn to read like a language. Colonel Thorne's arrival created a ripple of tension across the range. The base commanding officer wasn't scheduled to observe today's qualification, but here he was, stepping out of a staff car with the purposeful stride of someone who'd received interesting information. At 58, Thorne carried himself with the bearing of someone who'd commanded Marines in some of the military's most challenging environments. "Carry on," he announced, taking position near the observation area where he could monitor the proceedings without interfering. His presence immediately elevated the stakes. Whatever was happening here had attracted command attention. Brennan's demeanor shifted subtly in the presence of his commanding officer. The theatrical cruelty was replaced by professional seriousness, though his contempt for Brennan remained barely concealed beneath the surface. "Next group, step up," Brennan called out. "Let's see if anyone can actually hit what they're aiming at in these conditions." The second wave of shooters produced results that were marginally better, but still far from impressive. The wind was becoming increasingly unpredictable, with gusts that seemed to come from multiple directions simultaneously. What had started as a routine qualification was turning into a masterclass in environmental challenges. Private Ashford managed a respectable grouping, despite his nervousness, earning a nod of approval from Mills. Marine Fletcher struggled with the conditions, but maintained his composure, producing results that were solid if unspectacular. The pattern was consistent, competent Marines being humbled by conditions that pushed their abilities to the breaking point. "This is pathetic," Garrett muttered, loud enough for his voice to carry across the firing line. "Half these people shouldn't even be holding rifles. much less pretending to be snipers. His eyes focused on Bryn with predatory intensity, especially the charity cases taking up space that should go to real Marines. Bryn's precision shooting relied on advanced stabilization technology similar to what's found in military-grade medical equipment used by combat surgeons. These specialized systems combine micro-servo adjustments with real-time environmental analysis, allowing professionals to maintain steady performance under extreme pressure. The same innovations that help surgeons save lives in battlefield conditions now enable precision work in countless high-stakes civilian applications where accuracy can mean the difference between success and catastrophic failure. The medical equipment analogy wasn't lost on Dr. Holbrook, who had been observing Bryn's preparation ritual with professional interest. The woman's breathing patterns, her methodical equipment checks, and her apparent immunity to the psychological pressure around her suggested training that went far beyond basic military instruction. "Caldwell," Brennan barked, his voice cutting through the afternoon heat like a blade. "You're up. Time to see what that museum piece can do in the hands of someone who probably learned to shoot at a county fair." The mockery in his voice was thick enough to cut, and several recruits actually laughed out loud. Phones emerged from pockets again, ready to capture what everyone assumed would be an embarrassing finale to an already challenging day. Bryn stood slowly, her movements deliberate and unhurried despite the pressure. She carried her ancient rifle to the firing line with the same careful attention she'd shown throughout the day, seemingly oblivious to the circus atmosphere that had developed around her. 10 rounds, 1,000 yards, Mills announced, his voice neutral despite the tension crackling through the air. Wind conditions remain variable, gusts up to 35 miles per hour. Environmental factors are near the upper limit of what we consider acceptable for qualification. Bryn knelt behind the firing line and began adjusting her equipment with movements that were almost ritualistic in their precision. Her ancient rifle looked even more decrepit next to the high-tech equipment the other Marines had used, but her handling of it suggested a familiarity that went beyond mere training. Staff Sergeant Harwick stepped closer, his instincts telling him something was about to happen that would change the entire dynamic of this qualification. 20 years of experience had taught him to recognize the moments when assumptions were about to be shattered, and every nerve in his body was screaming that this was one of those moments. Bryn settled into her shooting position with fluid grace, her body seeming to meld with the rifle in a way that spoke of countless hours of practice. But there was something unusual about her setup. She wasn't using any of the environmental monitoring equipment that the other shooters had relied on. No wind meter, no ballistic calculator, no rangefinder to confirm distance. "Is she seriously not going to use any instruments?" Garrett whispered to Rodriguez, his voice carrying disbelief. "That's not confidence, that's stupidity." But Dr. Holbrook had noticed something else. Bryn's breathing had shifted into a pattern that was clinical in its precision. 4 seconds in, 4 seconds hold, 4 seconds out. It was a technique used by combat surgeons to maintain steady hands during high-stress procedures, not something typically taught in basic marksmanship courses. The first shot cracked across the range with surprising authority, the ancient rifle producing a sound that was somehow both crisp and mournful. Every eye focused on the electronic display board, waiting for the results that would either justify the mockery or create an uncomfortable moment of silence. The screen lit up with numbers that made several people blink and look again. 10 ring, dead center, perfect score. "Luck," Garrett announced immediately. "Azao inidi," his voice carrying more hope than conviction. Wind probably died down for a second, but Mills was checking his environmental monitors, and the wind was actually picking up. The conditions that had challenged the elite Marines were getting worse, not better. The second shot followed within 30 seconds, and the target board registered another perfect 10. This time the silence was more pronounced, and several recruits stopped at their casual conversations to focus on what was happening at the firing line. "Two lucky shots," Rodriguez muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. "Nobody shoots like that with that equipment in these conditions." The third shot shattered whatever remained of their skepticism. Another perfect 10, placed so precisely that it appeared to enlarge the hole created by the first 2 rounds. Bryn was shooting a group so tight that the electronic sensors were having difficulty distinguishing between individual impacts. Hold up. If you're getting those chills watching Bryn handle this equipment like a pro, make sure you're subscribed because this story is about to take some seriously unexpected turns. Trust me, what's coming will blow your mind. Colonel Thorne had stepped closer to the firing line, his experienced eye recognizing something that the younger Marines were missing. This wasn't luck or beginner's fortune. This was precision that spoke of training and experience that went far beyond anything provided in the standard military instruction. Staff Sergeant Harwick was thinking the same thing, and his hand unconsciously moved toward the radio, clipped to his belt. Whatever was happening here, it deserved command attention and careful documentation. The fourth and fifth shots maintained the impossible standard, perfect tens placed with mechanical precision that defied environmental conditions and equipment limitations. Bryn was shooting as if the wind didn't exist, as if the heat shimmer was irrelevant, as if the ancient rifle in her hands was actually a precision instrument rather than a museum piece. "This is impossible," Brennan said, his voice carrying more confusion than anger. "Nobody shoots like that. Not with that equipment, not in these conditions." But the electronic target system didn't lie, and the numbers on the display board told a story that was becoming impossible to ignore. 5 shots, 5 perfect tens, shot placement that so would have been impressive with the finest equipment under ideal conditions. Garrett Whitmore was staring at the target board with the expression of someone watching the laws of physics being casually violated. His expensive equipment and years of private instruction had produced results that paled in comparison to what this woman was achieving with what looked like surplus store rejects. The 6th shot rang out before anyone could voice their disbelief, and the target board registered another perfect 10. The electronic sensors were now showing a group so tight that all 6 shots appeared to be creating a single, slightly enlarged hole in the exact center of the target. Dr. Holbrook was taking notes, her medical training recognizing physiological signs that didn't match the situation. Bryn's heart rate appeared steady, her breathing remained controlled, and her muscle tension was consistent with someone performing a routine task rather than attempting something that was challenging the best Marines on the base. "Check the equipment," Harwick ordered Mills, his voice carrying the authority of someone who needed concrete answers to impossible questions. "Something's not right here." Mills ran a diagnostic on the electronic target system, while Bryn calmly prepared for her 7th shot. The system checked out perfectly. No malfunctions, no errors, no technical explanations for what they were witnessing. The 7th shot continued the pattern, perfect 10, placed with precision that suggested the shooter was operating on a level that transcended normal human capability. The ancient rifle was performing like a precision instrument in the hands of someone who understood its capabilities better than its manufacturers. Range Officer Mills had seen thousands of Marines attempt this qualification over his decades of service. He'd witnessed exceptional shooting, lucky shots, and everything in between. But he'd never seen anything that approached what was happening in front of him. This wasn't just exceptional marksmanship, this was artistry. "Wind's picking up," Private Ashford observed, his voice carrying concern. "Gusts are hitting 40 miles per hour now." As if to emphasize his point, a particularly strong gust kicked up dust across the range, creating visibility problems that would challenge even experienced shooters. The flags along the range were whipping frantically, indicating wind conditions that bordered on prohibitive for precision shooting. Bryn seemed completely unaware of the environmental challenges. Her 8th shot rang out with the same authority as the previous 7, and the target board registered another perfect 10. She was shooting in conditions that had defeated Marines with far superior equipment and making it look effortless. Staff Sergeant Harwick activated his radio, speaking in low tones to someone at the other end. His conversation was brief and urgent, the kind of exchange that suggested information was flowing up the chain of command at an unusually rapid pace. Colonel Thorne had moved close enough to observe Bryn's technique directly, and what he saw was triggering memories that made his blood run cold. The breathing patterns, the equipment handling, the way she seemed to read environmental conditions without instruments. These were hallmarks of training that wasn't available through normal military channels. The 9th shot maintained the impossible standard, and several Marines were now openly staring at the target board as if it might suddenly admit to malfunctioning. The electronic display showed 9 shots, clustered in a group so tight that they appeared to be a single, enlarged bullet hole in the exact center of the 10 ring. "This is getting weird," Garrett muttered, his earlier confidence completely evaporating. "Nobody shoots like that. It's not humanly possible." But Dr. Holbrook was beginning to form a different hypothesis. Her medical training included exposure to research on human performance under extreme conditions, and some of the studies had involved individuals whose capabilities fell far outside normal parameters. Elite operators, people whose training had pushed them beyond conventional limitations. The 10th and final shot rang out across the range, and the resulting silence was profound. Every person present focused on the target board with the intensity of people witnessing something that challenged their understanding of what was possible. Perfect 10. The electronic display showed 10 shots fired, 10 perfect scores achieved, and shot placement that created a single hole barely larger than 1 bullet diameter. In conditions that had challenged the best Marines on the base, with equipment that looked like it belonged in a scrapyard, this woman had just shot a perfect boom that defied explanation. The silence stretched for several seconds before Brennan found his voice. "Check the system again," he ordered Mills, desperation creeping into his tone. "Run a full diagnostic. There has to be an explanation." But Mills had already run multiple diagnostics, and the system was functioning perfectly. The shots had been real, the scores were accurate, and there was no technical explanation for what they'd just witnessed. Colonel Thorne stepped forward, his movement commanding immediate attention from everyone present. His face carried the expression of someone who was beginning to connect dots that formed a picture he didn't want to see. "Outstanding shooting, Marine," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "That's the finest marksmanship I've witnessed in 35 years of service." Bryn stood slowly, saving her rifle with movements that spoke of ingrained habit rather than conscious thought. "Thank you, sir," she replied, her voice steady despite the chaos of emotions swirling around her. "Where did you receive your marksmanship training?" Thorne asked, the question carrying weight that suggested the answer might be more significant than casual curiosity would warrant. Before Bryn could respond, alarms began wailing across the base. Not the routine signals that marked shift changes or meal times, but the urgent, piercing wail that indicated genuine emergency. Every Marine on the range immediately shifted into alert posture, hands moving toward weapons and radios. "Attention all personnel!" The base's public address system crackled to life, the voice of the duty officer carrying barely controlled urgency. "Unidentified aircraft detected on approach vector 7. All units to defensive positions. This is not a drill." The transformation in the Marines was immediate and dramatic. Training kicked in as weapons were secured, equipment gathered, and personnel began moving toward their assigned emergency positions. The sniper qualification was forgotten as more pressing concerns took precedence. But Bryn remained motionless, her ancient rifle still in her hands, her expression shifting from neutral to something that might have been recognition, as if she'd been expecting this development. "Might just be a test," she said quietly, her voice carrying barely enough volume to be heard over the alarms and shouting. Staff Sergeant Harwick, who had been reaching for his radio to coordinate response procedures, froze at her words. "What did you say?" Bryn looked at him with those steady blue eyes that seemed to see more than they revealed. "I said it might just be a test, Sergeant. Sometimes things aren't what they appear to be." The implications of her statement hit Harwick like a physical blow. If this was a test, and she knew about it in advance, then her presence here wasn't the coincidence it appeared to be, which raised questions about her identity that made his earlier suspicions seem like paranoid fantasy. Radar stations across the base had detected 3 small aircraft approaching from the north, flying low and fast in formation that suggested military precision rather than civilian navigation error. The objects were too small to be conventional aircraft, but too large and maneuverable to be birds or weather phenomena. In the range office, electronic screens displayed radar tracks that painted a picture of coordinated approach by unknown contacts. The duty officer was coordinating with air traffic control, Marine air traffic controllers, and base security in an effort to identify the intruders and determine appropriate response. "Drones," announced the technician monitoring the radar displays. 3 unmanned aircraft, probably surveillance or reconnaissance platforms. They're maintaining formation and appear to be conducting systematic observation of base facilities. Military contractors utilize comprehensive insurance coverage designed specifically for high-risk operational environments. These specialized financial protection systems account for equipment damage, liability exposure, and personnel safety in ways that standard policies simply cannot match. The advanced risk assessment protocols that protect special operations units have been adapted for civilian applications, offering protection levels that anticipate scenarios most people never consider until it's too late. The mention of drones triggered additional protocols, and within seconds, the base's defensive systems were coming online. Marines trained for exactly this scenario began deploying equipment designed to neutralize aerial threats, while command personnel worked to determine whether this represented genuine hostile action or some form of training exercise. Colonel Thorne's radio crackled with updates from the command post, but his attention remained focused on Bryn. Her calm demeanor in the face of what appeared to be a legitimate security threat was triggering instincts developed over decades of dealing with situations that weren't what they seemed. "All personnel, this is Base Command," the public address system announced. "Unidentified drones have been detected conducting surveillance operations over sensitive facilities. Security condition is elevated to DEFCON 2. All non-essential personnel report to hardened shelters immediately." The urgency in the announcement was unmistakable, but Bryn seemed completely unaffected by the crisis developing around her. She stood with her ancient rifle, watching the sky with the patient attention of someone waiting for a show to begin. Garrett Whitmore, whose earlier confidence had been shattered by her impossible marksmanship, was staring at her with growing suspicion. "How did you know this was going to happen?" he demanded. "You said it might be a test before the alarms even started." Bryn turned her attention to him, and for the first time since arriving at the range, she smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. It was the kind of smile that suggested knowledge and capabilities that hadn't been revealed yet. "Because," she said, her voice carrying an edge that hadn't been there before, "I've been waiting for this particular test for quite some time." The three drones appeared on the horizon as tiny specks against the desert sky, but their approach was becoming visible to the naked eye. Electronic warfare equipment was attempting to jam their control signals, but the aircraft continued their coordinated flight pattern as if unaffected by countermeasures. Range Officer Mills was coordinating with base security to ensure all personnel were accounted for and positioned safely. But his attention kept returning to the woman who had just shot a perfect score under impossible conditions and somehow predicted the current crisis. Staff Sergeant Harwick activated his radio again, this time speaking in codes that suggested he was communicating with personnel far above his normal chain of command. His conversation was brief and urgent, ending with acknowledgement that sounded more like confirmation than information exchange. The drones were now clearly visible, flying in tight formation approximately 300 feet above ground level. They appeared to be conducting systematic observation of base facilities, with particular attention to sensitive areas that would normally be protected by multiple layers of security. "Base defense systems are tracking the targets," announced the public address system. "All personnel remain in defensive positions until threat assessment is complete." But Bryn had moved away from the group, positioning herself with clear sight lines to the approaching aircraft. Her ancient rifle was unslung and ready, though she hadn't taken any overtly threatening posture that would alarm the Marines around her. Colonel Thorne stepped closer, his command instincts telling him that whatever was about to happen, this woman was at the center of it. "Marine, I need you to explain what you know about this situation." Bryn looked at him with those steady blue eyes that seemed to hold depths of knowledge and experience that didn't match her apparent age or background. "Sir, with respect, I think you're about to find out more than you bargained for." The first drone was now close enough that its configuration was clearly visible, a sleek, angular design that spoke of advanced technology and military precision. Electronic countermeasures were having no effect on its flight path, suggesting either sophisticated shielding or autonomous operation that didn't rely on external control signals. Dr. Holbrook had been observing Bryn's physiological responses throughout the crisis, and what she saw was profoundly disturbing. Where every other Marine was showing elevated stress indicators, increased heart rate, rapid breathing, heightened muscle tension, this woman remained as calm as if she were watching a training film. The second and third drones maintained precise formation, their synchronized movements indicating coordination that suggested either advanced artificial intelligence or human control from a source that wasn't being affected by the base's jamming efforts. Target acquisition confirmed, the lead drone's internal systems registered, though this information wasn't available to the Marines below. Scanning for designated assets, assessment protocols initiated. Range personnel were coordinating with base security to determine appropriate response procedures. But the drone's small size and apparent unarmed configuration made the situation ambiguous from a rules of engagement perspective. Bryn moved with fluid motion, bringing her ancient rifle to her shoulder with a speed that caught everyone by surprise. Her movements were smooth and practiced, suggesting muscle memory developed through countless repetitions under conditions far more stressful than training exercises. "What are you doing?" Brennan barked, his voice sharp with command authority. No one authorized engaging those targets. But Bryn wasn't responding to his authority anymore. Whatever role she'd been playing during the qualification was ending, and something else was taking its place. Something that suggested Drill Sergeant Brennan wasn't the highest-ranking person on this range. The first shot rang out with crisp authority, and 300 feet above the desert, the lead drone exploded in a shower of electronic components and composite materials. The destruction was precise and complete, leaving no doubt about the effectiveness of her marksmanship or the lethality of her ancient rifle. "Holy cow," breathed Private Ashford, his voice barely audible over the wind. "She just shot down a drone." The second shot followed within seconds, and the second drone disintegrated with the same precision as the first. Debris rained down onto the desert floor, creating a trail of wreckage that marked the aircraft's final moments. Colonel Thorne was reaching for his radio, but before he could key the microphone, Bryn's third shot rang out. The final drone exploded with dramatic finality, its remains scattered across the desert in a pattern that spoke of complete destruction. 3 shots, 3 targets destroyed, total elapsed time, 11 seconds from first target acquisition to final elimination. The ancient rifle had performed like a precision instrument in the hands of someone who understood aerial target engagement better than most Marines understood basic marksmanship. The silence that followed was profound and uncomfortable. Every person on the range was staring at Bryn with expressions that ranged from shock to disbelief to something approaching fear. The woman who had been mocked and dismissed had just demonstrated capabilities that challenged their understanding of what was possible. Staff Sergeant Harwick's radio crackled to life, and the voice that emerged was crisp with authority. "Test protocol Raven 17 complete. All stations assessment phase is concluded. Repeat, assessment phase is concluded." The words hit the assembled Marines like a physical blow. Test protocol, assessment phase. The implications were staggering, and several people actually took steps backward, as if proximity to Bryn might suddenly become dangerous. Colonel Thorne lowered his radio slowly, his face carrying the expression of someone who had just received confirmation of something he had hoped wasn't true. "Outstanding performance, Agent," he said, his voice carrying recognition and something that might have been respected. Garrett Whitmore was staring at the wreckage scattered across the desert, then at Bryn, then back at the wreckage. "Agent," he repeated, his voice cracking slightly, "what the hell is going on here?" But before anyone could answer, the physical confrontation that would change everything began to unfold. Garrett's shocked confusion was transforming into angry embarrassment, and his size advantage over Bryn was starting to look like an opportunity to salvage some dignity from this impossible situation. "I don't care what kind of trick this is," he snarled, stepping toward her with aggressive intent. "Nobody makes me look like an idiot and gets away with it." His hand reached for her shoulder, fingers closing on the worn fabric of her gray t-shirt, with enough force to stop her movement and assert physical dominance. The grip was meant to intimidate, to establish that whatever skills she might possess, he was still bigger, stronger, and more physically imposing. But as his fingers tightened on the fabric, something unexpected happened. The worn material, stressed by heat and rough handling, began to tear along a seam that had seen better days. The sound of ripping cloth was sharp in the desert air, clearly audible over the wind and the distant sound of approaching vehicles. And that's when everything changed. The torn fabric fell away from Bryn's shoulder and chest, revealing what had been hidden beneath the modest gray t-shirt. Etched across her skin in brilliant blue ink was a masterwork of tattoo artistry that left every observer stunned into absolute silence. A dragon. Not the simple decorative designs that adorned many Marines, but an intricate masterpiece that spoke of hours under the needle, an artistic skill that bordered on the supernatural. The creature coiled across her chest and shoulder, with lifelike detail that made it appear to move in the desert sunlight. Scales that seemed to glimmer with their own inner fire, eyes that held depths of ancient wisdom, and claws that looked sharp enough to tear reality itself. But it wasn't just the artistry that made everyone freeze. It was the specific symbolism that any Marine with classified clearance would recognize immediately. The dragon's position, the precise way its talons gripped a military insignia, the subtle details that marked this as something far beyond decorative body art. Colonel Thorne's face went completely white as recognition hit him like a physical blow. Staff Sergeant Harwick actually took a step backward, his hand moving unconsciously toward his sidearm before training reasserted itself. Dr. Holbrook dropped her medical clipboard, the plastic clattering on concrete with a sound that seemed impossibly loud in the sudden silence. Because every person with security clearance on that range knew exactly what they were looking at. The Blue Dragon was the mark of Raven Division, the Pentagon's most classified operational unit. Personnel who didn't officially exist, conducting missions that never happened, solving problems that were too sensitive for conventional military solutions. And the woman they'd been mocking, dismissing, and treating like entertainment was wearing that mark with the casual ease of someone who had earned it through trials that would break most people's minds. The revelation hung in the desert air like a thunderclap, reverberating through the consciousness of every Marine present, and fundamentally altering their understanding of everything they had witnessed. The impossible marksmanship, the predicted emergency, the calm demeanor in the face of crisis. Suddenly, it all made perfect, terrifying sense. Garrett Whitmore's hand was still gripping the torn fabric, but his face had gone slack with shock. His confident aggression had evaporated, replaced by the dawning realization that he had just physically assaulted someone whose capabilities and authority were so far beyond his own that comparison was meaningless. Staff Sergeant Harwick found his voice first, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "Raven Division," he breathed, the words carrying reverence and fear in equal measure. "You're one of them." Bryn looked at him with those steady blue eyes that now seemed to hold depths of knowledge and experience that were frankly intimidating. "I'm exactly who I need to be, Sergeant," she replied, her voice carrying an edge of authority that made everyone present stand a little straighter. The dragon tattoo caught the sunlight as she moved, the brilliant blue ink seeming to shift and flow with lifelike realism. This wasn't decorative art. This was a badge of membership in an organization that existed in the shadows of American military power, conducting operations that shaped global events while remaining completely invisible to public scrutiny. Colonel Thorne stepped forward, his movement sharp and precise as he came to attention and rendered a perfect salute. The gesture was automatic, driven by training and protocol that demanded recognition of authority, regardless of apparent rank or circumstances. "Ma'am," he said, his voice carrying the respect due to someone whose operational authority transcended normal military hierarchy. "I wasn't informed that Raven Division was conducting evaluation exercises on my base." Bryn acknowledged his salute with a slight nod, her bearing shifting from the submissive posture she'd maintained throughout the day to something that radiated quiet command presence. "That's rather the point, Colonel. Evaluations work best when the subjects don't know they're being evaluated." The implications of her statement rippled through the assembled Marines like a shockwave. Everything they had witnessed, the qualification, the mockery, the emergency, the drone attack, had been a carefully orchestrated assessment designed to evaluate their capabilities, judgment, and character under stress. Dr. Holbrook was frantically reviewing her observations, trying to reconcile the physiological data she'd collected with this new understanding of Bryn's identity. Raven Division operatives were legendary for their capabilities, but the medical literature on their training and performance was classified far beyond her clearance level. Range Officer Mills was beginning to understand why his electronic target system had recorded impossible results. If Bryn was in the Raven Division, then her marksmanship capabilities were the product of training that pushed human performance far beyond conventional limitations. The ancient rifle hadn't been a liability. It had been a deliberate choice to avoid drawing attention to equipment that might raise questions. Private Ashford, who had shown kindness to Bryn when others were cruel, found himself caught between pride and terror. His instinctive recognition that she was different had been more accurate than he could have imagined, but the implications of that difference were staggering. Brennan, whose theatrical cruelty had been the centerpiece of the day's mockery, looked like he was calculating the potential career implications of having systematically humiliated someone whose complaint could probably reach the Secretary of Defense. His face had gone through several color changes, settling on a pale green that suggested nausea. "Okay, I know your heart is racing right now watching this unfold. If you're on the edge of your seat wondering how this is even possible, hit that notification bell, because the revelation coming up is going to change everything you think you know." The torn fabric of her t-shirt fluttered in the desert wind, creating a surreal tableau where one of the military's most classified operatives stood revealed among a group of Marines who had spent the day treating her like entertainment. The contrast between her apparent vulnerability and her actual capabilities was so stark that several people were having difficulty processing the cognitive dissonance. Garrett Whitmore finally released his grip on the torn fabric, his hand falling to his side as if the material had suddenly become radioactive. The confident aggression that had driven him to physical confrontation was completely gone, replaced by the kind of shock that comes from realizing you've just made a catastrophic error in judgment. "This can't be real," he muttered, his voice carrying desperate hope that this was all some elaborate joke or training scenario. "Raven Division doesn't exist. They're just stories." Bryn looked at him with an expression that might have been sympathy. "Garrett, there are a lot of things that don't officially exist. That doesn't make them any less real." Her voice carried the calm authority of someone who was accustomed to dealing with people who were having difficulty accepting new realities. The kind of voice that suggested extensive experience in situations where revelation of hidden truths created psychological shock. Staff Sergeant Harwick was conducting rapid mental calculations, trying to determine how much trouble he might be in for running unauthorized background checks on someone whose real identity was classified above his clearance level. His earlier suspicions had led him down investigative paths that might now be considered security violations. Colonel Thorne lowered his salute but maintained his position of attention, clearly uncomfortable with the protocol implications of the situation. Raven Division operatives existed outside normal military hierarchy, but their authority was backed by Pentagon directives that superseded local command structure. "Ma'am, I need to understand the scope of this evaluation," he said carefully. What aspects of base operations were being assessed? Bryn adjusted the torn fabric of her shirt, trying to maintain some degree of modesty while accepting that her cover was completely blown. "Everything, Colonel. Response times, decision-making under pressure, adaptability to unexpected circumstances, but most importantly, character assessment of personnel selected for potential advanced training." The words advanced training sent a chill through the assembled Marines. In military parlance, that phrase often meant selection for operations that existed in the gray areas between conventional warfare and activities that governments preferred to deny. Dr. Holbrook stepped forward, her medical training overriding her shock at the revelation. "The physiological control you demonstrated during the shooting, that's not standard military training. The breathing patterns, heart rate stability, muscle tension management, that represents conditioning that goes far beyond anything in conventional curricula." Bryn nodded in acknowledgement. Raven Division training incorporates techniques developed for extreme operational environments, situations where conventional military preparation is insufficient for mission success. The clinical description masked realities that would give most people nightmares. Raven Division operatives were trained for missions that required capabilities at the extreme edge of human performance, in conditions where failure meant not just personal death, but potential catastrophic consequences for national security. Range Officer Mills was reviewing the electronic records from the day's shooting, trying to reconcile the impossible results with this new understanding of Bryn's capabilities. The data showed shot placement that defied environmental conditions and equipment limitations. But now, he understood that both the conditions and equipment had been deliberately challenging to test her abilities under adverse circumstances. "The rifle," he said, his voice carrying a dawning comprehension. "That wasn't surplus equipment. It was deliberately selected to test your ability to achieve precision results with compromised gear." Bryn smiled, and for the first time all day the expression reached her eyes. "Very good, Mills. Field conditions rarely include optimal equipment. The ability to adapt and overcome equipment limitations is crucial for operational success." Private Ashford was experiencing a complex mixture of pride and terror. His instinctive kindness towards someone who appeared vulnerable had been noted by an operative whose evaluation could potentially affect his entire military career. But he was also realizing that his assessment of her as different had been more accurate than anyone could have imagined. The desert wind continued to whip across the range, carrying with it the acrid smell of electronic components from the destroyed drones. The wreckage served as physical evidence of capabilities that challenged conventional understanding of human performance under pressure. Professional military training programs incorporate advanced psychological assessment and skill certification protocols that set global standards for competency evaluation. These educational frameworks combine theoretical knowledge with practical application testing, ensuring graduates meet the highest performance benchmarks. Similar certification systems are now available for civilian professionals seeking to validate their expertise through internationally recognized credentialing programs that demand both academic excellence and demonstrated practical ability. The mention of professional certification protocols resonated with Colonel Thorne, who was beginning to understand that the day's events represented far more than a routine training exercise. If Raven Division was conducting personnel evaluation at his base, it meant someone at very high levels of command had identified his Marines as potential candidates for operations that didn't appear in normal military documentation. Staff Sergeant Harwick's radio crackled again, this time with a voice that carried unmistakable authority. All personnel involved in the Raven 17 assessment report to a classified briefing facility immediately. This is a direct order from Pentagon Oversight. The implications were staggering. Within hours, every Marine who had witnessed the day's events would be subjected to security briefings that would probably include non-disclosure agreements backed by federal penalties that could include imprisonment for violations. Garrett Whitmore was staring at his hands as if they belonged to someone else. The realization that he had physically grabbed a Raven Division operative was sinking in, along with the potential consequences for his military career and possibly his freedom. "What happens to us now?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Bryn looked at him with an expression that contained both understanding and evaluation. "That depends, Garrett. It depends on what you learned today, how you apply those lessons going forward, and whether you can demonstrate the kind of character that merits trust with classified information." Her words carried implications that went far beyond simple disciplinary action. Raven Division's involvement suggested that some of the Marines present were being evaluated for selection into programs that required psychological profiles, demonstrating exceptional reliability and judgment. Dr. Holbrook was taking notes again, her medical training allowing her to recognize that she was witnessing the aftermath of a psychological operation designed to assess human behavior under conditions of extreme stress and revelation. The careful orchestration of events suggested planning that probably involved psychological specialists with expertise in human performance evaluation. Range Officer Mills began securing the electronic equipment while maintaining careful documentation of the day's events. Every aspect of the qualification would need to be preserved for analysis by personnel whose clearance levels allowed access to information about Raven Division operations. The approaching sound of vehicles indicated that the isolation of the range was about to end. Whatever happened next would involve personnel with the authority and clearance to handle situations involving classified military operations and potential security violations. Colonel Thorne checked his watch, noting that the entire sequence of events had unfolded in less than 3 hours. From routine qualification to revelation of classified operations, the day had compressed enough drama and revelation to fill months of normal military service. "Ma'am," he said to Bryn, "I assume there will be formal debriefing procedures?" She nodded. "Extensive debriefing, Colonel, both for operational assessment and security protocol compliance. Some of your Marines demonstrated qualities that suggest potential for advanced training opportunities. Others revealed characteristics that require careful consideration regarding security clearance eligibility." The dual implications of her statement, opportunity and threat, created a tension that would follow each Marine through the debriefing process and potentially affect the trajectory of their entire military careers. As the convoy of vehicles approached the range, kicking up dust clouds that obscured their specific configuration, Bryn began gathering her equipment with the same methodical precision she'd demonstrated throughout the day. The ancient rifle was cleaned and secured, with movements that spoke of habit developed through countless repetitions. The blue dragon tattoo remained visible through the torn fabric of her shirt, serving as a constant reminder that nothing about this day had been what it appeared to be. The mark that had revealed her true identity would now serve as a symbol of the moment when assumption met reality and lost decisively. Staff Sergeant Harwick was coordinating with base security to ensure proper handling of personnel and evidence related to classified operations. His earlier suspicions had been vindicated, but the validation came with responsibilities and potential consequences that extended far beyond routine military administration. The first vehicle in the convoy was already visible through the dust, its configuration suggesting the kind of specialized equipment used for handling sensitive military operations. The transition from training exercise to classified operation was becoming official, with all the protocol implications that entailed. Brennan stood apart from the group, his earlier theatricality replaced by the grim realization that his treatment of Bryn had been witnessed and documented by personnel whose evaluation could affect his career trajectory. The cruel entertainment he'd orchestrated had become evidence of his judgment and character under pressure. Private Ashford maintained his position near Bryn, his earlier kindness having created a relationship that might prove beneficial during the evaluation process. His instinctive recognition of her worth despite her appearance had been noted by someone whose recommendation could open doors that most Marines never knew existed. The sound of helicopter rotors added another layer of complexity to the approaching convoy. Whatever resources were being deployed to handle this situation suggested that Raven Division's involvement represented significant operational investment and potential security implications. As the convoy reached the range perimeter, Bryn completed her equipment check and stood ready for whatever transition was about to occur. The woman who had arrived in a torn t-shirt and ancient rifle was preparing to resume her real identity with all the authority and responsibility that entailed. The Blue Dragon caught the afternoon sunlight one final time as the desert wind continued to whip across the range. In a few hours, the Marines who had witnessed its revelation would be bound by security agreements that would make this day a classified memory. But the lessons learned would influence their careers and characters for decades to come. The impossible had become routine, assumption had been shattered by reality, and a group of elite Marines had discovered that their understanding of strength, capability, and authority required fundamental revision. The woman they had mocked had proven to be exactly what they aspired to become, and her evaluation would determine whether any of them possessed the character necessary to follow in her footsteps. The convoy reached the range with military precision that spoke of rehearsed operations rather than emergency response. 3 black SUVs, followed by a modified communications truck, their windows tinted dark enough to conceal occupants while maintaining visibility for drivers. The lead vehicle's antenna array suggested sophisticated communication capabilities that went far beyond standard military equipment. Colonel Thorne stepped forward to coordinate with the arriving personnel, but his movement was intercepted by a gesture from Bryn that carried unmistakable authority, despite her torn clothing and compromised appearance. The Blue Dragon tattoo remained visible through the ripped fabric, serving as a constant reminder that conventional military hierarchy had been suspended by circumstances beyond normal protocol. "Let them establish a perimeter first," she said quietly, her voice carrying the calm authority of someone accustomed to managing complex operations involving multiple agencies with competing jurisdictions. Security protocols for Raven operations require specific procedures that supersede standard base response. The first personnel to emerge from the vehicles wore civilian clothing that didn't quite conceal the military bearing and equipment that marked them as something more than ordinary government employees. Their movements were coordinated and purposeful, establishing a security perimeter that encompassed the entire range while maintaining clear sightlines and communication with the command vehicle. Staff Sergeant Harwick watched the deployment with professional interest, recognizing tactical positioning that spoke of training and experience that went beyond conventional military instruction. These weren't regular security personnel. They were specialists whose capabilities probably included scenarios that most Marines never encountered during entire careers. A woman emerged from the lead SUV with the confident stride of someone accustomed to command authority in complex situations. Her appearance was professional but unremarkable. Dark suit, conservative haircut, and an expression that revealed nothing about her thoughts or intentions. But her immediate focus on Bryn suggested familiarity that went beyond routine operational coordination. "Status report," she said, her voice carrying crisp authority that made every Marine present stand slightly straighter, despite having no idea who she was or what authority she represented. Bryn straightened into a posture that suggested military bearing despite her civilian clothing and compromised appearance. "Assessment complete, Director. All primary objectives achieved with additional intelligence gathered regarding secondary targets." The formal exchange confirmed what several Marines had begun to suspect. This entire day had been orchestrated as an evaluation exercise with multiple layers of complexity that extended far beyond the simple sniper qualification they'd assumed they were attending. Dr. Holbrook stepped closer, her medical training driving curiosity about the psychological and physiological aspects of what they'd witnessed. "The performance capabilities you demonstrated exceed known human parameters for marksmanship under environmental stress. The breathing control, heart rate stability, and precision motor function under pressure suggest conditioning that goes beyond conventional training methodologies." Bryn acknowledged the observation with a slight nod. Raven Division training incorporates techniques developed for extreme operational environments where conventional human limitations become tactical liabilities. The conditioning you observed represents years of specialized preparation for missions that require capabilities at the edge of human performance. The clinical description masked realities that would challenge most people's understanding of what was possible through training and conditioning. Raven Division operatives underwent preparation that pushed psychological and physiological boundaries in ways that were classified far beyond conventional military instruction. Range Officer Mills was coordinating with the arriving personnel to secure electronic records and evidence from the day's activities. Every aspect of the qualification had been monitored and documented with precision that suggested the evaluation had multiple purposes beyond simple marksmanship assessment. The target system recorded shot placement that defies statistical probability, Mills reported to the woman who had been addressed as director. Environmental conditions were deliberately challenging, and equipment limitations were significant, but results exceeded optimal performance parameters for precision shooting. The director reviewed data on a tablet that appeared far more sophisticated than standard military equipment. Her analysis was brief but thorough, suggesting familiarity with performance standards that weren't available in conventional military documentation. Private Ashford remained positioned near Bryn, his earlier kindness having created a relationship that might prove significant during whatever evaluation process was about to unfold. His instinctive recognition of her capabilities despite her appearance had been noted by personnel whose recommendations could affect the trajectory of entire military careers. Ashford, the director said, her attention focusing on the young Marine with an intensity that suggested his actions throughout the day had been carefully observed and analyzed. Your behavior during the assessment demonstrated characteristics that align with psychological profiles we monitor for potential advanced training candidates. The implications of her statement sent a chill through the assembled Marines. Advanced training in this context probably meant selection for operations that existed in the classified margins of military activity, where conventional preparation was insufficient for mission success. Garrett Whitmore stood apart from the group, his earlier confidence completely shattered by the revelation of his spectacular misjudgment. The realization that he had physically confronted a Raven Division operative was sinking in along with potential consequences that could extend far beyond military disciplinary action. "What happens to us now?" he asked, his voice carrying desperation that spoke of someone beginning to understand the magnitude of his errors. The director looked at him with an expression that revealed nothing about her assessment or intentions. "That depends entirely on what you learn today and how you demonstrate that learning going forward. Some lessons are more expensive than others, Marine Whitmore." Her words carried implications that suggested consequences might be determined by factors beyond simple disciplinary action. Character assessment under stress was apparently as important as capability evaluation for whatever selection process was involved. Brennan stepped forward with movements that suggested someone trying to salvage what remained of his authority and reputation. "Ma'am, I need to understand the scope of this operation and its implications for my personnel and my command responsibilities." The director's attention shifted to him with an intensity that made him unconsciously step back. "Sergeant Brennan, your conduct during this assessment has been thoroughly documented and will be included in reports that reach levels of command authority you've probably never considered. Your treatment of Agent Caldwell reflects judgment and character traits that require careful evaluation." The formal designation of Bryn as Agent Caldwell confirmed her operational status while simultaneously emphasizing the severity of the situation that had developed. Military personnel who mistreated classified operatives faced consequences that extended far beyond routine disciplinary action. Staff Sergeant Harwick activated his radio to coordinate with base security regarding the handling of classified operations and potential security violations. His earlier suspicious investigations had been vindicated, but the validation came with responsibilities and implications that extended into areas of security protocol he'd never encountered. This story proves that heroes walk among us in the most unexpected forms. If it gave you chills, share it with someone who needs to see that strength comes in all shapes and sizes. The next video is going to explore what happened after this incident. The establishment of security protocols proceeded with efficiency that spoke of rehearsed procedures for handling situations involving classified operations and potential security compromises. Every Marine present would need to undergo debriefing that included security assessments and non-disclosure agreements backed by federal penalties. Colonel Thorne approached the director with movements that suggested someone navigating unfamiliar protocol territory. "Ma'am, I need to understand the administrative implications for my base and personnel. This operation was conducted without my knowledge or authorization, which creates command responsibility issues that require resolution." The director consulted her tablet before responding. "Colonel, your base was selected for this assessment based on personnel evaluations and facility capabilities that aligned with our operational requirements. Your lack of advanced knowledge was necessary to maintain assessment integrity and security protocols." The explanation confirmed that Camp Pendleton had been chosen for specific reasons related to the quality of personnel and training facilities rather than random selection. The Marines who had participated in the assessment represented pre-screened candidates whose capabilities and psychological profiles had already attracted attention from organizations that operated beyond conventional military oversight. Dr. Holbrook continued her documentation of the physiological and psychological aspects of what they'd witnessed. Her medical training allowed her to recognize that she was observing the aftermath of a psychological operation designed to assess human behavior under conditions of extreme stress and revelation. The conditioning required to maintain physiological control under the stress levels demonstrated today suggests training methodologies that aren't available through conventional military channels, she observed. The heart rate stability, controlled breathing patterns, and precision motor function under pressure indicate preparation that extends far beyond standard military instruction. Brin acknowledged the assessment with professional recognition. Raven Division training incorporates techniques developed through research partnerships with institutions that specialize in human performance under extreme conditions. The preparation required for our operational environment necessitates capabilities that challenge conventional understanding of human limitations. The clinical discussion masked realities that included training scenarios designed to push operatives beyond breaking points that would incapacitate most military personnel. Raven Division preparation involved psychological and physiological conditioning that enabled function in environments where conventional training proved insufficient. Range equipment was being systematically documented and secured by personnel whose expertise in handling classified materials was evident in their methodical approach to evidence preservation. Every aspect of the day's activities would be analyzed by specialists whose clearance levels allowed access to information about capabilities and training methodologies that remained classified. The communications truck had established links with facilities that weren't identified, but clearly involved command authority at levels that superseded local military hierarchy. The scope of coordination suggested that the day's assessment had implications that extended far beyond routine personnel evaluation. Marine Fletcher, who had maintained neutral observation throughout the day's events, found himself being interviewed by personnel whose questions suggested detailed knowledge of his background and psychological profile. The assessment was thorough and professional, but clearly designed to evaluate suitability for opportunities that weren't being explicitly described. Your behavior during the assessment demonstrated analytical thinking and adaptability that align with characteristics we monitor for advanced training consideration, the interviewer informed him. Your ability to recognize anomalous patterns while maintaining operational focus suggests potential for specialized applications. The careful language suggested opportunities that couldn't be discussed in detail without security clearances that required extensive background investigation and psychological evaluation. Fletcher was being offered possibilities that most Marines never encountered, but acceptance would involve commitments and responsibilities that extended far beyond conventional military service. Professional military training programs incorporate advanced psychological assessment and skill certification protocols that set global standards for competency evaluation. These educational frameworks combine theoretical knowledge with practical application testing, ensuring graduates meet the highest performance benchmarks. Similar certification systems are now available for civilian professionals seeking to validate their expertise through internationally recognized credentialing programs that demand both academic excellence and demonstrated practical ability. The mention of professional certification protocols resonated with the assembled Marines, many of whom were beginning to understand that their participation in the day's assessment might lead to training opportunities that were both extraordinary and demanding. The standards for Raven Division selection probably exceeded anything they'd encountered in conventional military service. Security personnel completed their perimeter establishment, and began coordinating with base security to ensure proper handling of classified operations and potential security implications. The transition from training exercise to classified operation was becoming formalized through procedures that emphasized the sensitive nature of what had been revealed. Private Ashford was interviewed separately by personnel whose questions focused on his motivations for showing kindness to Brin despite social pressure to participate in the mockery that had characterized most Marines' behavior. His responses were carefully evaluated for indicators of character traits that aligned with psychological profiles required for classified operations. Your recognition of worth, despite appearance, suggests analytical capabilities and moral courage that are significant factors in our selection criteria, his interviewer explained. The ability to maintain individual judgment under group pressure indicates psychological strength that we value highly. The assessment confirmed that character evaluation had been as important as capability demonstration during the day's assessment. The way Marines had treated someone they perceived as vulnerable revealed personality traits that were crucial indicators for determining suitability for operations, requiring exceptional judgment and moral courage. Garrett Whitmore's interview was conducted by senior personnel whose approach suggested recognition of the complexity of his situation. His actions had demonstrated both positive and negative characteristics that required careful evaluation to determine appropriate consequences and potential remediation opportunities. Your equipment expertise and technical knowledge represent valuable capabilities, his interviewer acknowledged. However, your treatment of personnel you perceived as inferior reveals judgment patterns that require serious consideration regarding security clearance, eligibility, and leadership potential. The balanced assessment suggested that even serious errors in judgment might not automatically disqualify candidates if they demonstrated genuine learning and character growth. Garrett was being offered the possibility of redemption, but it would require demonstrating fundamental changes in attitude and behavior. Staff Sergeant Harwick was debriefed by personnel whose clearance levels allowed discussion of the intelligence aspects of his earlier investigation. His suspicious recognition that Brin didn't fit conventional patterns had been noted and evaluated as evidence of analytical capabilities that aligned with intelligence assessment requirements. Your instinctive recognition of anomalous indicators demonstrates observational skills and analytical thinking that we value in intelligence operations, his debriefer explained. Your methodical approach to investigation, while maintaining appropriate caution, shows judgment that aligns with specialized training opportunities. The discussion confirmed that his earlier suspicions had been professionally handled and that his investigative approach had been evaluated positively despite the potentially sensitive nature of conducting background research on classified personnel. Holbrook's medical expertise had provided valuable documentation of physiological aspects of Raven Division capabilities that contributed to understanding of human performance under extreme conditions. Her observations would be incorporated into research that supported advanced training development and capability assessment. Your medical documentation of physiological control under stress provides valuable data for understanding human performance capabilities that inform our training methodologies, she was informed. Your analytical approach and professional objectivity demonstrate qualities that align with research applications we support. The recognition suggested that her involvement in the assessment had been valuable beyond simple medical support and that her expertise might be relevant to ongoing research into human performance optimization for specialized military applications. Range Officer Mills found that his documentation of impossible marksmanship had provided crucial evidence of capabilities that challenged conventional understanding of precision shooting under adverse conditions. His technical expertise and meticulous record-keeping had contributed significantly to the assessment's documentation requirements. Your technical analysis and systematic documentation provide essential evidence for capability assessment that informs our operational planning, he was told. Your professional approach and attention to detail demonstrate expertise that we value in technical support applications. The acknowledgement confirmed that his role had extended beyond simple range management and that his technical expertise had contributed to evaluation processes that supported classified operational requirements. Drill Sergeant Brennan faced the most serious consequences of anyone present, as his conduct had demonstrated leadership failures and character deficiencies that raised questions about his suitability for positions involving authority over personnel who might be selected for classified operations. Your conduct during this assessment raises serious concerns about your judgment, character, and suitability for leadership positions involving personnel with security clearances, he was informed. Your treatment of Agent Caldwell demonstrates attitudes and behaviors that are incompatible with the trust and responsibility required for classified operations oversight. The assessment suggested that his career trajectory had been fundamentally altered by his actions during the day's events. Leadership positions requiring security clearances might no longer be available to him, and his advancement opportunities had probably been severely limited by demonstrated judgment failures. Colonel Thorne's debriefing focused on command implications and administrative requirements for integrating assessment results into personnel management and security protocols. His base had been used for classified operations without his advanced knowledge, which created both opportunities and responsibilities that required careful handling. Your facility and personnel have been evaluated for potential expanded roles in supporting specialized training and assessment operations, he was informed. Your command performance during today's events will be considered in determining future operational applications for your base and personnel. The discussion suggested that Camp Pendleton might be selected for ongoing roles in supporting Raven Division operations, which would bring additional resources and opportunities along with increased security requirements and operational responsibilities. The systematic debriefing process continued through the afternoon as each participant was interviewed, assessed, and informed about immediate consequences and potential future opportunities. The scope and thoroughness of the evaluation confirmed that the day's assessment had been planned and executed as a comprehensive evaluation with multiple objectives and long-term implications. Bryn completed her own operational debriefing with the director, providing detailed assessment of each Marine's performance, character demonstration, and potential suitability for various applications ranging from standard security clearance, eligibility, to consideration for advanced training opportunities. Ashford demonstrates exceptional potential, she reported. His character, analytical thinking, and moral courage under pressure align perfectly with psychological profiles for advanced training. I recommend immediate consideration for specialized preparation programs. Her assessment of Private Ashford confirmed that his instinctive boneness and independent judgment had been recognized as indicators of exceptional potential that warranted accelerated development through opportunities that weren't available to most military personnel. Harwick shows intelligence analytical capabilities that could be valuable in support roles, she continued. His investigative instincts and methodical approach suggest suitability for intelligence applications, though his security clearance will require elevation before advanced applications become available. The recognition of Staff Sergeant Harwick's potential confirmed that his earlier suspicions and investigation had been handled professionally and that his capabilities had been evaluated positively for specialized applications within the intelligence community. Fletcher demonstrated adaptability and analytical thinking that indicate potential for technical applications, she noted. His ability to recognize patterns while maintaining operational focus suggests suitability for specialized technical training that supports classified operations. Marine Fletcher's evaluation confirmed that his neutral observation and analytical approach had been noted as indicators of capabilities that aligned with technical support roles in classified operations, requiring specialized skills and security clearances. Whitmore presents a complex assessment, Bryn admitted. His technical knowledge and equipment expertise represent genuine capabilities, but his character demonstration raises serious concerns about judgment and leadership potential. Remediation is possible, but would require fundamental attitude adjustment and demonstrated behavioral change. The balanced assessment of Garrett Whitmore suggested that even serious character deficiencies might be addressable through appropriate intervention and demonstrated commitment to change. His technical capabilities were valuable enough to warrant consideration for redemption opportunities if he proved capable of genuine growth. Brennan represents a leadership failure that requires administrative action, she concluded. His conduct demonstrates attitudes and judgment patterns that are incompatible with authority over personnel who may be selected for classified operations. Remedial action should focus on character development rather than advancement opportunities. The assessment of Drill Sergeant Brennan confirmed that his actions had disqualified him from leadership positions involving classified operations oversight and that his career advancement had been significantly limited by demonstrated character failures during the assessment. The director reviewed assessment results and coordinated with command authority to determine immediate actions and long-term implications for each participant. The scope of decision-making authority suggested involvement by Pentagon-level personnel, whose oversight extended to resource allocation and strategic planning for specialized operations. Assessment results confirm the value of this evaluation methodology, the director concluded. Personnel identification and character assessment under controlled stress conditions provide reliable indicators for selection decisions that inform our operational capability development. The confirmation validated the assessment approach while emphasizing the importance of character evaluation alongside capability demonstration for determining suitability for classified operations requiring exceptional judgment and moral courage under extreme pressure. Security protocols were implemented to ensure appropriate handling of classified information and protection of operational security for ongoing Raven Division activities. Every participant would be bound by non-disclosure agreements backed by federal penalties, but selected personnel would also receive security clearance processing for potential advanced training opportunities. The sun was beginning to set over the desert range as the systematic processing of assessment results neared completion. The day that had begun as routine sniper qualification had evolved into a comprehensive evaluation that would affect the career trajectories and life paths of every Marine present. Transportation arrangements were coordinated for personnel who would be transferred to advanced training facilities for specialized preparation that supported classified operations. The selection process had identified candidates whose capabilities and character aligned with requirements for operations that existed in the margins of conventional military activity. Private Ashford found himself selected for immediate transfer to advanced training that would prepare him for assignments involving capabilities and responsibilities far beyond anything he'd encountered during standard military service. His character demonstration had earned him opportunities that most Marines never experienced. Staff Sergeant Harwick would undergo security clearance processing for elevation to levels that supported intelligence applications within the classified community. His analytical capabilities and investigative instincts had been recognized as valuable for specialized roles requiring security clearances that involved access to sensitive information. Marine Fletcher received selection for technical training that would prepare him for support roles in classified operations requiring specialized skills and equipment expertise. His adaptability and analytical thinking had qualified him for opportunities that combined technical challenge with operational significance. Garrett Whitmore was offered remedial training designed to address character deficiencies while leveraging his technical capabilities for constructive applications. His redemption would require demonstrated commitment to fundamental attitude change and behavioral modification that addressed the judgment failures revealed during the assessment. Colonel Thorne received notification that his base had been approved for expanded roles in supporting specialized training and assessment operations. The additional resources and responsibilities would bring opportunities for professional growth, along with increased security requirements and operational complexity. Dr. Holbrook was invited to participate in research programs that studied human performance optimization for specialized military applications. Her medical expertise and analytical approach had been recognized as valuable for supporting advanced training development and capability assessment. Range Officer Mills received recognition for technical expertise that supported classified operations documentation and assessment. His methodical approach and attention to detail had contributed significantly to evaluation processes that informed operational planning and capability development. Drill Sergeant Brennan faced administrative action that would limit his advancement opportunities and remove him from positions involving authority over personnel with security clearances. His character failures had disqualified him from leadership roles, requiring trust and judgment in sensitive applications. The comprehensive consequences reflected the thorough nature of the assessment and the importance of character evaluation alongside capability demonstration for determining suitability for classified operations requiring exceptional performance under extreme conditions. Evening approached as final preparations were completed for the transition from assessment site to operational security protocols. The range would be secured and sanitized to ensure protection of classified information while maintaining the appearance of routine training activities for personnel without appropriate clearances. Bryn completed her equipment, securing, and prepared for transition to whatever operational requirements awaited her return to active Raven Division status. The day's assessment had been successful in achieving its objectives, while providing valuable intelligence about personnel capabilities and character that informed ongoing operational planning. The blue dragon tattoo remained visible through her torn shirt as she coordinated final details with the director and prepared for departure. The mark that had revealed her identity would serve as a permanent reminder of the day when assumption met reality, and conventional understanding was challenged by capabilities that exceeded normal human parameters. As darkness began to settle over the desert range, encrypted communication equipment in the command vehicle activated with the distinctive tone that indicated priority message traffic from classified sources. The director answered with protocols that suggested communication with authority levels that operated far above local command structure. The conversation was brief and urgent, conducted in terminology that indicated operational requirements requiring immediate response. When it concluded, the director's expression had shifted to reflect concern that suggested significant developments in ongoing operations requiring Raven Division attention. "Agent Caldwell," she called, her voice carrying urgency that indicated the transition from assessment to operational status was accelerating beyond planned timelines. "We have a situation developing that requires immediate deployment. Assessment debriefing will be compressed to essential elements only." Bryn acknowledged the change with professional acceptance that spoke of experience with situations where operational requirements superseded planned procedures. "Understood, Director. What's the situation?" The director consulted secure communication equipment before responding. 3 Raven operatives have gone missing during a classified operation in Eastern Europe. Last communication indicated possible compromise of Dragon Protocol security measures. Extraction or termination assessment is required within 72 hours. The implications were staggering. Dragon Protocol represented some of the most sensitive operational procedures in Raven Division's classified inventory. If those measures had been compromised, the security implications extended far beyond the immediate situation and potentially affected ongoing operations worldwide. "Asset extraction or hostile termination?" Bryn asked, her voice carrying the clinical detachment of someone experienced with situations where such distinctions became crucial for operational planning and rules of engagement. "Unknown at this time," the director replied. "Intelligence suggests possible coercion or compromise, but hostile action cannot be ruled out. Assessment will require capabilities that align with your operational specialties and experience with extreme environmental conditions." The assignment confirmed that Bryn's unique capabilities were required for a mission that combined intelligence assessment with potential combat operations in conditions that would challenge conventional military capabilities. The Eastern European environment added complexity that required specialized preparation and equipment. Staff Sergeant Harwick overheard portions of the exchange, and his intelligence training allowed him to recognize the significance of what was being discussed. Missing operatives and compromised protocols represented security crises that could affect national security if not resolved quickly and effectively. "Ma'am," he said, stepping forward with the careful respect of someone addressing authority whose scope he was beginning to understand. "If personnel selection is being considered for this operation, I request consideration for support applications that leverage my analytical capabilities." The director looked at him with an expression that suggested evaluation of his request in the context of operational requirements and security implications. "Staff Sergeant, your assessment results indicate potential for intelligence applications, but this operation requires clearances and preparation that extend beyond current qualifications." The response acknowledged his capabilities while emphasizing the specialized requirements for operations that involved compromise of sensitive protocols and potential hostile action in foreign environments. However, the fact that his request was being considered rather than immediately dismissed suggested recognition of his potential value. Private Ashford, whose selection for advanced training had been confirmed, found himself wondering whether his accelerated development might include preparation for operations that combined the technical challenges he'd witnessed with the moral courage that had been recognized in his character assessment. "If training opportunities include preparation for supporting operations like this, I'm ready to commit to whatever preparation is required," he announced, his voice carrying conviction that spoke of someone who understood the significance of what he was volunteering for. Bryn looked at him with an expression that combined recognition and concern. Ashford, the preparation required for operations like this involves psychological and physical conditioning that challenges everything you think you know about your own limitations. The commitment extends far beyond normal military service and affects every aspect of your life going forward. The warning was delivered with the compassion of someone who understood the costs of the path he was considering, but also with recognition that his character demonstration had earned him the right to make informed decisions about his future. Garrett Whitmore, whose assessment had identified character deficiencies requiring remediation, stepped forward with movements that suggested someone trying to demonstrate fundamental change in attitude and behavior. "Ma'am, I understand that my conduct today disqualified me from immediate consideration for advanced applications," he said, his voice carrying humility that hadn't been present earlier. "But if remedial training can address my character failures, I want to commit to whatever development is required to earn consideration for supporting operations that matter." The request demonstrated recognition of his failures, along with commitment to change, that suggested potential for redemption if he proved capable of sustaining fundamental attitude adjustment and behavioral modification over time. The director reviewed secure communication updates while considering personnel requests and operational requirements that were developing beyond the planned timeline for the day's assessment. Agent Caldwell, personnel selection for this operation will be determined based on operational requirements and available preparation time. Assessment results from today provide valuable intelligence for future selection decisions, but immediate deployment requirements take precedence. The response confirmed that the Eastern European operation required immediate attention that couldn't accommodate the extended preparation required for integrating newly assessed personnel into classified operations involving sensitive protocols and potential hostile action. Security protocols were accelerated to ensure appropriate handling of classified information and protection of operational security for the developing situation. Personnel without appropriate clearances would be processed through debriefing procedures that maintain security while providing appropriate recognition for their participation in the assessment. Transportation arrangements were expedited for Brin's deployment to operational staging areas where specialized equipment and intelligence briefings would prepare her for the Eastern European mission. The urgency of the situation had compressed normal preparation timelines, requiring acceleration of procedures that normally involved extensive planning and coordination. The range was being systematically secured and sanitized to eliminate evidence of classified operations, while maintaining the appearance of routine training activities for personnel without security clearances. Every aspect of the day's assessment would be classified and secured to protect operational security for ongoing and future Raven Division activities. As final preparations proceeded, Brin's encrypted satellite phone activated with the distinctive signal pattern that indicated priority communication from classified sources operating in hostile environments. The director authorized the communication, recognizing that intelligence updates might affect operational planning for the developing situation. "Raven 1, we have a situation." The voice was distorted by encryption, but carried urgency that suggested immediate threat assessment. "3 operatives missing, Eastern Europe Theater, Dragon Protocol may be compromised." The confirmation of the situation matched earlier intelligence, while providing additional details that emphasize the security implications of potential protocol compromise. Dragon Protocol represented operational procedures that were fundamental to Raven Division security, and compromise could affect operations worldwide. "Understood," Brin responded. "Asset extraction or hostile termination determination? Unknown at this time," came the reply. "Intelligence suggests possible coercion scenarios, but hostile action cannot be ruled out. Assessment requires immediate deployment with extraction capability and termination authorization as backup." The operational parameters confirm that she would be deployed with authority to make critical decisions about the fate of missing operatives based on field assessment of their status and security implications of their potential compromise. "Going dark in 6 hours," she confirmed, using terminology that indicated transition to operational status with limited communication capability to protect mission security. "Understood." The communication ended, leaving the assembled Marines with the understanding that they had witnessed the beginning of an operation that would take Brin into situations that challenged conventional understanding of military service and human capability. Colonel Thorne stepped forward to coordinate final base security procedures and ensure appropriate handling of the transition from assessment to operational deployment. Agent Caldwell, this base and its personnel are available to support your mission requirements. Whatever resources you need for operational success will be provided. The offer confirmed that Camp Pendleton's role had evolved beyond simple assessment location to potential support facility for classified operations, requiring specialized resources and personnel capabilities that aligned with Raven Division requirements. Dr. Holbrook completed her documentation of physiological observations, while recognizing that her research might contribute to understanding capabilities that supported operations like the one developing. The performance characteristics you demonstrated today provide valuable data for understanding human potential under extreme conditions. Your success in this mission will inform our understanding of what's possible through advanced training and conditioning. The recognition emphasized the connection between research and operational application that supported development of capabilities for missions that existed at the extreme edge of human performance and endurance. Range Officer Mills secured technical documentation while understanding that his records might be analyzed to support operational planning for future assessments and training programs. The marksmanship data from today establishes benchmarks for precision shooting under adverse conditions that inform our understanding of equipment and environmental limitations. The acknowledgement confirmed that technical aspects of the assessment would contribute to ongoing development of training standards and equipment specifications that supported operational requirements for classified missions. Staff Sergeant Harwick coordinated with security personnel to ensure appropriate handling of classified information, while recognizing that his analytical capabilities had been noted for potential future applications. Ma'am, when this operation concludes, I remain available for intelligence applications that support Raven Division requirements. The commitment demonstrated understanding that his involvement in the day's assessment had created opportunities and responsibilities that extended far beyond normal military service, but also recognition that advanced applications would require additional preparation and security clearance processing. Private Ashford prepared for transfer to advanced training facilities while understanding that his accelerated development might eventually lead to supporting operations similar to what was developing. Ma'am, whatever preparation is required for supporting operations like this, I'm committed to meeting the standards and requirements. The dedication confirmed that his character demonstration had earned him opportunities that most military personnel never encountered, but also recognition that the development required would challenge everything he thought he understood about his own capabilities and limitations. Garrett Whitmore accepted transportation to remedial training facilities while understanding that his redemption would require demonstrating fundamental change over an extended period. I understand that earning consideration for supporting these operations will require proving that my character failures have been addressed through sustained behavioral change. The acknowledgement demonstrated recognition of the seriousness of his errors while expressing commitment to the development required for eventual consideration for applications that required exceptional character and judgment under extreme pressure. Marine Fletcher prepared for technical training that would develop his capabilities for supporting classified operations, requiring specialized skills and equipment expertise. The technical challenges I witnessed today confirm that supporting these operations requires capabilities that go far beyond conventional training. The observation demonstrated understanding that technical support for Raven Division operations involve complexity and requirements that challenged conventional military technical training and required specialized development over extended periods. As transportation departed with selected personnel, the range returned to apparent normalcy while concealing the profound changes that had resulted from the day's assessment. Security protocols ensured that evidence of classified operations was eliminated while maintaining appropriate documentation for ongoing analysis and planning. The sun had set completely over the desert, leaving stars visible in the clear sky that had witnessed events challenging conventional understanding of military capability and human performance. The day that had begun with routine sniper qualification had evolved into comprehensive assessment that would affect careers and lives for decades to come. Bryn departed for operational staging areas where specialized preparation would ready her for a mission that combined intelligence assessment with potential combat operations in hostile foreign environments. The Blue Dragon tattoo remained visible as she transitioned from assessment facilitator to operational agent, carrying with her the authority and responsibility for decisions that could affect national security. The encrypted satellite phone remained active for priority communications as intelligence updates and operational planning continued to develop the Eastern European mission. 3 missing operatives and compromised protocols represented challenges that required capabilities and judgment that operated at the extreme edge of human performance and moral courage. Personnel selected for advanced training and specialized applications departed with the understanding that their development would prepare them for supporting operations that existed in the classified margins of military activity. Their character demonstration and capability assessment had earned them opportunities that most military personnel never encountered. The base security was enhanced to protect information about Raven Division operations while maintaining the appearance of routine training activities for personnel without appropriate clearances. Colonel Thorne's command had evolved to include responsibilities for supporting classified operations that operated beyond conventional military oversight. Assessment results were processed through channels that reached Pentagon-level authority responsible for resource allocation and strategic planning for specialized operations. The evaluation methodology had proven valuable for identifying personnel whose capabilities and character aligned with requirements for classified missions requiring exceptional performance. Research documentation was secured for analysis by specialists whose expertise informed development of training methodologies and capability assessment for operations that challenged conventional understanding of human limitations. Dr. Holbrook's observations would contribute to ongoing research supporting advanced training development. Technical records were preserved for analysis supporting equipment development and training standards for precision shooting under adverse conditions. Range Officer Mills' documentation would inform ongoing development of standards and specifications that supported operational requirements for classified missions. The comprehensive scope of consequences and opportunities resulting from the day's assessment confirmed the value of character evaluation alongside capability demonstration for determining suitability for operations requiring exceptional judgment and moral courage under extreme conditions. As night settled over Camp Pendleton, the transformation from routine military base to support facility for classified operations was complete. Selected personnel had begun development that would prepare them for applications beyond conventional military service, while security protocols protected information about capabilities and operations that challenged public understanding of military possibilities. The Eastern European mission developed through intelligence channels that operated beyond normal oversight, requiring capabilities and authority that existed in the classified margins of national security operations. 3 missing operatives and compromised protocols represented challenges that would test human performance and moral courage under conditions that exceeded conventional training preparation. But that was a story for another day, in another place, where the boundaries between possible and impossible would be tested once again by individuals whose capabilities and character had been forged through experiences that existed beyond conventional understanding. The assessment was complete, the selection had been made, and the next chapter of operations that didn't officially exist was about to begin. The desert wind continued to blow across the range, carrying with it the knowledge that strength came in forms that couldn't be predicted, that capability often hid behind appearances that deceived, and that the most dangerous person in any room might be the one that nobody noticed until it was far too late to change the outcome they had chosen through their own actions and character.
Behind every uniform is a person trying their best. See each other with respect. Thank you for being here. Don't forget to subscribe to TNG Story.